Hi, welcome. This is the third of a series of videos about using Sea Grant's integrated financial planning model for kelp aquaculture. And the topic of this video is going to be the startup expenses associated with a kelp farm. Now, there's going to be quite a lot of repetition in this video as far as how to actually navigate your way around Excel and some of the tricks and tips that I have in here. The repetition will be a lot of the same information that I provided in the nursery video, but the reason that I'm repeating myself is because there will be people who are doing one or the other, but not both, a nursery and a farm. So as I said, there are a couple of different ways to navigate your way around this model. You can either click in these text boxes up here or use these worksheet tabs down here like a normal Excel model. Let's go ahead and use the worksheet tabs to get us to the startup farm page. And so here we are on the startup farm page. At the top of each of these user input pages is a sort of overview text box, which contains some information about what it is that you're going to be looking at in each of these sheets. And so if you scroll down a bit, you come to a section of this page, which is really just a flow-through review of what you already entered in your business model page. So right here we have a business model that includes a small nursery, a small-scale nursery, and a small-scale farm. What small means to you as a kelp farmer is really kind of relative. We don't have any hard and fast definitions. The only way that the scale of your farm has been relevant thus far is that if you have a large-scale farm, we've got some checks and balances set up so that you can't say, well, I'm going to sell, my product by the blade at $10 a pound to upscale restaurants, right? You can do that. You can say that you're going to do that if you want, but we've got a sort of a fail-safe for people wouldn't inadvertently do that if they say they're going to have a large farm and do a small-scale harvest. If you go and try to change any aspect of this, like right now you've got a small farm, but let's try to see if we can say, no, I want to make a medium-sized farm. Right? You aren't going to be able to make that change on this page. If you want to change the scale of your farm or the scale of your nursery, or your revenue models, right? You've got to do that back here on the business model page. And the reason for that is for consistency and flow through so that the numbers work right in terms of financial outputs. So let's go ahead and change our farm model just to a medium size, just for fun. We go back to the business model page, and here currently it says small, and let's change that to medium. Okay, now if we go back to the startup farm page, now we've got our medium farm. Moving down then, we come to an area of the worksheet that has some white boxes, and white boxes means that users can input their own assumptions in these boxes. So here you can specify how many lines of kelp you're going to have, how long they're going to be, and how much you're going to get usable harvest per foot. So let's say a medium-sized operation, maybe there's 15 lines and they're 200 feet long, and you're going to get 6 pounds of kelp per foot of line. Okay, once we enter that, these boxes start calculating. Right, so that 15 times 200 times 6 is 18,000 pounds of kelp. Right? If you are a farmer who has in mind a particular number of pounds you want to harvest, you can go back and play with these numbers to get you where you want to be. Right? So let's say if I can get 8 pounds per foot, what'll that get me? Right? So that'll give me 24,000. Or let's say I'm going to have 20 lines. Right, so you can see how this number changes depending on what you put in. So this is a number that is relevant to you not only because it will give you a sense of your revenue, which I'll get to in a minute, but also because it will allow you to kind of think about some operational and design decisions based on what perhaps your revenue projections are, right? So this can go around in circles if you want it to. The revenue estimate here is calculated as the number of feet you're going to be harvesting times the weighted average dollars per pound that you entered in your business model page. Over here, another output from this page is your costs per pound. Part of your cost per pound, your annualized startup cost per pound, which does not include your operating expenses, but our annualized cost per pound is going to be the depreciation of all this capital equipment that you are proposing to buy, and then your consumables, including your seed string. Okay, so that's what's on the input and output for this page. And what we'll do is, as we're going through this page, you'll see how these numbers change as we start entering data. Okay, the first section you come to is your permitting costs. These, of course, are going to vary by state or by area, and you're just going to have to write those in. Now, it's important to always, to the degree that you can, input information about why you're saying that these numbers are what they are. So if you say that it's $10,000, that it's going to cost you $10,000 to get a permit, you should really say where you got that number. So Jacqueline told me to expect to spend this much on, and then, better yet, give it a date, right? On 6/10/2023. Okay. So that way, when you come back to this model in the future and you're like, well, what's this $10,000? That seems kind of high. You can say, oh, Jacqueline told me it would be like that, right? So that's the point here. Now you'll notice that this $10,000 is thus far your total upfront cost for design and permitting, and there it shows up, your total initial investment. Now we aren't amortizing or depreciating the permits at this time in this model. So those aren't going to be an annualized expense. If you have annually recurring permitting costs, you're going to need to enter those into the operating expense sheet, which we will touch on briefly today, but they'll go into more detail in a future video. The next section we're going to look at is the materials for actually that you're going to need to purchase and lay out for your grow out array. Now, this is something that you're going to have to create your own estimates for. We have provided some examples, but this spreadsheet certainly could never give you all the details that you'd want for your own particular setup. And so that's going to be you as a farmer working with your Sea Grant advisor if you wish to do so. We did, however, take a look at some sample arrays. We've got a hyperlink to it right here, and then there's also, you can just go over to the worksheet directly. Let's click on the worksheet directly. So over here is a worksheet pre-populated with some sample farm arrays. We have an example of a 2-line grow out array, a 10-line grow out array, and a 15-line grow out array. You can go in here. This worksheet, unlike the other ones, this worksheet is not protected. You can go in here and change anything if you want. But if you have an estimate for some other source, either bit by bit or as the total cost of laying out your farm, you can use these sample tables as a way to kind of keep track of all your numbers and use it as a calculator if you wanted to. Or if you don't want to, if you just have one bulk number that you've worked out, then you can just go ahead either way and enter that directly into the startup farm page. Okay. We do have a hyperlink here that'll take you back, right? So you can just click on that, and here we are again. So let's say that the array is $20,000. Okay. And the seed string is going to be, I don't know, $20 a spool. Okay. Now, you may have noticed this cell here has a little red triangle up in the upper right-hand corner. And those triangles indicate a comment that speaks specifically to maybe some questions that might arise around the particular content of that cell. So here we just say you can enter the cost estimates found in the array page in the workbook, or you can enter your own. So we also have seed string. Now, if you're growing your own seed string and holding it all back for yourself, your cost is going to be nothing, right? The cost for that is already included in your cost of your nursery operations. But if you have to buy your seed strings from somebody else, then you state how much it is per spool. Let's say that we've got 10 spools, right? So there's our $200 cost, and then our array, the depreciation, it's got a 4-year life, so it's going to have $5,000 a year in depreciation. Okay. Now, if we look up to the top, what we see is that we have $30,000 so far in total investment, and that our depreciation plus consumables, including seed string, divided by the number of pounds harvested, already adds up to 16 cents. Okay, 16 cents a pound, just for the grow out array materials. Okay. So the rest of this spreadsheet, the grow out array, is like the most complicated and perhaps hard to understand the way that I've set it up. But the problem is, of course, that they're totally, individualized, and so there was no way to create a template with every possible piece of equipment you could possibly want or need. So we made some templates that are customizable if you wanted to customize them to your own needs, or you can do your estimating outside of this model and just bring the grand total in. Okay. So the rest of this page is really meant to be prompting you to think about what else you might need to spend money on to start up your farm. Because it's not just laying a bunch of lines out in the water, right? You got to have some place to store your gear. Now, you may or may not actually need to rent or purchase a storage facility. But if you do, right, this is where you would put that in. The next section we want to prompt you to think about is the potential cost of a new boat. Now, many of you will be bringing your existing boat into this business. This section is only for if you're buying a new boat or a new engine or any other kind of equipment, if you're buying it up front new. If you are bringing your own existing equipment, you want to put it in the name of the business. You need to enter the value of that equipment into the beginning balance sheet. So let's say that you do, in fact, want to buy a new boat. So it's a $30,000 boat, and this was a quote that you got from a boat dealer on 6/10/2023. Now, I'm going to have one boat here. When I put in the number of how many of these items I'm going to get, the model calculates the total, and then you get this sort of error, a prompt that reminds you that you need to enter the life expectancy of these long-lived assets. Otherwise, you don't have a way to calculate depreciation, which is part of your annual operating expenses. So let's say that the life expectancy of this boat is 10 years. Right now, that's a $30,000 boat. You're going to spread that cost over 10 years, so that means that your annualized cost is $3,000. And if we go up to the top now, we are continuing to calculate. Now I've got a total initial investment of $60,000. And if I divide that by my number of pounds of harvest, that'll get me to 26 cents a pound for my annualized startup costs. And you continue working your way through this spreadsheet in this manner. If you're going to buy a new truck, right? Again, if you bring in your existing truck into the business, you put that into your beginning balance sheet. The next element that we want to encourage you to consider is the cost of the containers and totes that you might need to hold your lines, right? So let's say those are $300 a piece, and I'm going to need 10 of those, right? And again, you are prompted to enter the life expectancy so that the calculation will calculate appropriately. And let's say those are 5 years, right? So that gives you $600 in annual costs, and you just proceed through each of these areas. You are going to need protective clothing for working out there in the water in the winter. You are going to need gear to get the sporophytes out there onto the lines. For many of these data entry tables, you also have the option to input other information. So if you have other gear that's not included on this list that you need to use to transport out your sporophytes out there onto the water, you can enter those here and just specify what they are and how much they're going to cost. Now the next section is the gear that you're going to need for harvesting your kelp. And this could be everywhere from knives and totes to like a fancy specialized piece of equipment that we see some farmers using, which costs, tens of thousands of dollars. Right. So some of these, so the gear here can range in costs and can range in sort of relevance, but you're going to need to have obviously gear for harvesting the kelp. Here, if we have our specialized harvest equipment, you can have one of those, and then it calculates as before. It's going to last forever. It's going to last, let's say, for 10 years. So it's $2,000. Let's say that we're also going to buy some brooms for $10 a piece, and we're going to get 3 of those. And honestly, I don't think they're going to last, right? So you can say that your equipment, some of your equipment is going to need to be replaced. That will drop down into your consumables totals. Right, so continuing on then, once you've harvested your kelp, then you're going to need to have to do some maintenance on your equipment. Maybe you need a new power washer for this project. Get a power washer, one of those. You think it's going to last you 5 years. And you just keep entering this data. Are you going to need a new computer to run this business? $1,000, one of them. And computers these days, I think they are a 3-year asset. So that's $333 a year. And so that gets us then to the bottom of this particular data entry sheet. These are, if we go up to the top now, right, taking into account the depreciation on this $84,000 initial investment, that gets us to a cost per pound of kelp of just the annualized startup costs. This does not take into account the cost of operating your farm. And the cost of operating your farm would include mostly the labor and fuel associated with each aspect of setting up, seeding, monitoring, and then harvesting your kelp. We'll get into the operating expenses section of this worksheet in a later video. So right now, that's really all you need to do in order to be able to enter the data for your startup expenses for the farm, and then we can proceed to the operating expenses. So thank you for your time and attention, and watch for more videos.